Welcome to Sunlit Brushstrokes. Today we'll sketch and paint these three beautiful fall florals in watercolor pencil. First we'll draw everything, then we'll add color, and finally blend it with water. Join me in the studio as we celebrate the beauty God's placed in this season. Let's go ahead and get started. For supplies, you're going to want an assortment of sizes of cheap watercolor paper, such as Canson XL. And then for watercolor pencils, I'm going to be using an assortment of colors from Staedtler and Faber-Castell. We're going to start with our easiest one, which is the Autumn Joy. And for this one, I want to have a couple of clumps or bunches of flowers. I'm going to have this one more side profile rather. So it's going to be something like this. And I'm doing it very lightly with my golden ochre, and I'm going to darken things with my other colors. But I'll just color this in quick, kind of in a scribbly pattern. I'm actually kind of going all over the place, a little bit circular, a little bit just jagged. And this is going to be my base coat for this clump of flowers. And as I said, this one is a side profile. So it's kind of laying like a goofy kind of floppy pancake almost, if you will. I will be getting some texture and some life on here, and it's going to look better in a minute. And then this one, I'm going to do a little bit more in a clump that's a little bit more circular, almost as if it's a little bit more head on, or we're looking a little more directly at it. It's facing us. So it's going to have a little bit more of a circular final finish. So I'm just, again, using this really scribbly circular motion just to kind of give myself a base for where this bunch of flowers is going to be. Might even put a little bit more to this one. We can get a little bit closer. We'll make it almost visually connected, not precisely connected, but just get them nice and close to each other. And then I'm going to go in with my lighter green and kind of connect everything. So this one is going to be connected more visibly with all these little stems, because again, it's side profile, so you can see all the little stems. We're going to get some little leaves on here after too. And I know Autumn Joy is a little bit more of a minty green, so I might end up throwing in a little bit of our more minty green colors here in a minute, because this is definitely not as minty. This is more of a fall color, I would say. But Autumn Joy kind of defies the fall colors, doesn't it? And Autumn Joy leaves tend to be a little bit more I don't know, kind of like this flat. They almost look like a succulent or something, don't they? They have some texture to them along the edges, but overall they're pretty, I don't know. They almost have a rounded look to them. It's just a gentle tip. I don't know. I don't quite like that one. I'll see if I can get this one, get a few more leaves looking more appropriate here. Let's do a few of these on here. Like I say, I'm going to grab some more minty kind of green here. This green is way too yellow. Maybe we'll make this one turned on its side so we can only see part of it. Make the stem more almost like coming from the middle or something. I don't know. Again, it's got a slight point on the end of the leaf, but not too much. I might even ignore the little bit of serration that's there, just because it's mild. Maybe we don't need it to give the impression of this being Autumn Joy. But we're going to go ahead and do these tiny little flowers, and they're almost like tiny little stars. So I'm actually going to just kind of, not with perfect stars, but kind of almost like stars, fill this shape in. And these are looking more directly at us, and so that's why I'm making them a little bit more star shape. I know each of these little flowers isn't perfect. Like, I don't like that one there. It's a little too perfectly star. These ones I'm trying to make a little bit more of a scribble star. A little less put together. And I'm using my magenta pink for this. And in some places I'm kind of coming out of the boundaries of the shape that I drew, just to keep this looking a little bit more organic. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one, except some of them I'm going to have a little bit more this shape. So they're almost like a V or a scribbly little V, something like this, because they are side profile. So I'm going to do the same sort of idea, but most of them will be this almost like scribbly little V shape. And then every now and then I'll throw in a flower that's a little bit more like a star. So I'm going to use this brighter green now and fill in these leaves. I'm going to use the side of the pencil and just fill it in very softly, just so we have a little bit of this green pigment there for us when we go to wet. And I might even go through a little bit of darker green on the stems, but I'm just going to fill in these leaves a bit, just so we have a little bit more of this. Like I say, it's almost a minty green. It's not quite minty, but it's just a much softer green than a lot of the greens that we do see in the fall, but it's a fall flower, so let's do these stems too, or the little veins rather, darker. darken this little piece that's peeking around here. And I might even just go grab one of my neutral greens because I can't do without it, can I? And just throw a tiny little bit of it. Just a few spots, just to keep things from getting too vibrant. I might even fill in this section using the side of the pencil and just get a little shadow under here because the Autumn Joy flower will be casting a bit of a shadow onto this leaf. I'm going to just even push this leaf back a little bit by putting a little darkness. Maybe just kind of towards the center or the base of the flower. Not necessary, but I do like a little bit more darkness here. All right, I'm going to actually add just a tiny bit more dark into the lower side of these. So I'm filling it in just a tiny bit more. You could even use a darker color for this. Maybe I'll grab the mauve, kind of our mauvey pink color, because it's, I don't think this is gonna quite give it enough punch. I don't know, let's see. Just grabbing the mauvey color here. It's kind of a pinky purple, and I'm just using it just to do these little star shapes and little scribbles on the lower side of these and a little bit more to the left. Autumn Joy can kind of range in color, can't they? As they go through their different stages of blooming, they tend to start more light and warm colored, and then as the season progresses, they get a little bit more cool tone, a little darker. Okay, let's call that good enough. Let's do a sunflower. So let's start with one nice, beautiful center in the middle here. Or I should say a little, it's not quite in the middle, is it? A little off to the side. And then I think I'll probably do one maybe at the side that's kind of drooping. But let's start with this one. And I'm going to do a smaller circle inside the large circle because sunflowers usually have kind of like almost two sections to the seed section, don't they? If you want to call it that. And then I'm just going to go ahead and put some little lines where these are going to be kind of like the centers of our leaves, or the centers of our petals. And then I'm going to use those as guidelines to draw all of my petals. So let's go ahead and draw these. Now the petals of a sunflower are kind of like a leaf. So we're going to start and just kind of go ahead and draw something like that. And again, like I said, they almost are like a leaf. So we'll do some small ones first, and then we're going to get some larger ones going here. So I'm just kind of randomly going around the outside of this, and then I'll add some bigger ones that can kind of almost go behind these other ones. So they're overlapping. And then I can fill in the gaps afterwards with a few more petals, depending on where it seems like I need them. So let's figure that out. Probably could have one right here. And I'll straighten that out a little bit. And probably something over here, hey? And maybe one more here. I almost feel like this could have something in there. I don't know. I could always just extend one of these a little bit, or actually make it curl like I've done with some of my leaves before. Yeah, let's do that. We've done it with leaves, but we can do it with petals too. Maybe? Do we like that? I don't know. It felt like it needed something there, but I wasn't sure if a full petal was going to be overboard. I don't know. You can really decide how many of these you want in here. Let's just, okay, maybe we can put some more here. It's easy to just almost go overboard, and I don't want to go overboard. I'm not even sure that I'm going to need one tipping here, but I could. I think we could probably put one here. We're just going to have to, I'm going to make this one tipped so we don't see the full sunflower. So they kind of have this base to them, this green base. And then some of these will be green leaves, these first ones. So let's zoom in so you guys can see that. These are going to be green leaves here. And then these ones will be the yellow petals. Let's just give us some guidelines first, and then we'll do our petals on top of there. This one will be a little bit sideways, and we'll put a few overlapped in there behind. And then we'll make the stem kind of bend like this. Whoops, I'm going a little sloppy there. We don't want that bad a stem. want something that's kind of narrow for this particular sunflower, and then this one back here can have a wider stem, and they can cross over like that. And then we'll throw a few leaves, and the leaves are really very similar to the shape of the petals in some ways, where they're just a very nice basic leaf, but they can be quite large at times. So let's just try and throw these in, and we're just going to try and randomly make this work. And then we will go ahead and add some color. Let's start with our light green, and this is kind of a slightly olivey green, a little bit limey green, and I'm just going to fill in the center of it just with basic solid circular coloring. Not doing anything overly special right now, and as I come closer and closer to the edges, I am fading that color out so that there's less of it, and I've kind of overlapped that other ring there a little bit. And I will be using this green color again in the leaves, but let's just get this center kind of in place. And I'm going to use my golden color, and I'm going to do almost like little scribbly, I don't know if you want to call them stars, but I'm going to create this little bit of texture along the outside of these shapes. So just scribbling, just a little bit of a zigzag, a little bit of X's, a little bit of star shape, just kind of all these random little scribbles. I just want them going in every which direction. And this is the same golden color that I actually did my drawing with. Then I'm going to go ahead and grab my burnt sienna color, and I'm going to make that darker along the edges, both the inside and the outside of this ring. So I'm doing the same thing here, a little bit of that same scribbly motion. And then I'm doing it on the other side of this ring. So I've got kind of the scribbly dark shape on both sides. And again, just a little bit of every which direction that I'm using that scribble. And then I'm going to use this color, and starting at the kind of the ring, I'm going to work my way towards the center, and I'm just almost creating a gradation. So I put a little heavier pressure, lighten off, heavier pressure, lighten off. So I'm going heaviest beside the ring, and then I'm lightening off as I work my way closer to the green. Now we could add a little more texture to this too if we want, but we'll do that in a minute. I'm just kind of doing a little bit of circular coloring, nothing overly special. And then I could add just some tiny, I don't know, scribble dots. There is a lot of tiny dots in there, obviously, right? That's where the seeds are, so, or eventually are going to be. This one hasn't gone to full seed yet, but let's go ahead and throw in some extra green. Maybe I'll even use a bit of darker green. This is a Faber-Castell pencil, and it does have more of an olivey tinge to it. And I'm going to fill that in and then work my way. And I'm kind of not exactly doing dots. I'm kind of still doing these funny little textured scribbles, but I don't mind how that looks. If you want to take the time and do tinier dots, you definitely could. I'm going to work a little bit closer to the edge because I feel like that dark green and the burnt sienna mixing together actually look kind of nice. They just make a nice dark color. And if you really want to push that further, you could grab a kind of a dark purple or red violet and just push that the very, very, very darkest spots of this ring. You could kind of repeat that. Again, I'm just doing those random little scribbles, and I'm filling that in. And then I'm going to do a little bit of that here. And there we have the center of our flower. Now let's move on to to the petals rather, and then we'll come back and do a little bit more in terms of shadows when we get close to the center. Do you enjoy working in watercolor pencil? If so, I think you'll be interested in my free 2-part pencil technique mini workshop. Whether you're looking for ways to add texture to your work, or if you simply enjoy coloring and would like to add dimension to your coloring pages, this workshop is for you. You can even apply many of these techniques to graphite pencil or other dry media. I'll share examples of how I apply these techniques to inspire you with ideas for your own artwork. You can sign up for this workshop at the link in the description below. Now back to today's video. I'm going to start with yellow. I almost think this is going to be too bright, so I'm just going to put a very quick coat of it everywhere on all of my petals. So I'll do this really quickly. I'll speed the camera up so that you don't have to watch every single little pencil stroke, and I will go ahead and do the smaller sunflower as well with that color. Now you're going to want kind of a light golden yellow, and we're going to go in and do the shadows a little bit and more details on these petals. So I'm going to go to the base and I'm going to just move in this direction, almost flicking outwards a little bit towards the tips of each of these petals here. So this is where I'm actually paying attention to direction. And sometimes these fold and you can get some really interesting areas that are even darker, but I'm just going over everything again, starting darkest at the bottom and lightening off. The thing I'm going to also do to push these shapes apart from each other is whichever petal is behind, it's going to get extra of this golden color on it. So I'm just deepening the shapes where the edges are meeting, and the back one is going to be a little darker. And that's going to push it behind. And to do that, you can continue with that same linear motion, although you can do a little bit of gentle circular coloring as well, just to kind of fill that section in, the little shapes where the edges are meeting. And I'm going to be doing the same thing down here. Finally, I'm going to use my burnt sienna and push things the furthest into the dark areas. And I'm going to be doing that really where the edges of each of these petals is meeting our center shape. So I'm just going to put a little of that, definitely using it as well to emphasize my shadows in a few places. And anywhere that I feel I need to get things a little bit darker. Anywhere that there's sections between the little petals and I want to darken those, I could do that. And just softly push those petals apart from each other and push them back so that the furthest back ones have a little bit more brown where the edges, or I should say a little bit more burnt sienna where the edges are meeting the ones in front. Same thing as we did with our golden color. This is also a point if you want a little more vibrancy to your sunflower, you could throw a little bit of bright orange kind of towards the center of each of these petals so that they're a little bit less brown. And you can choose to use brighter colors if you find that you really don't like as much of the brown in those sections. Again, I'm thinking fall and neutral colors, but there's really no reason you can't have bright, intense fall colors. So if you prefer using these bright colors instead of the duller brownish colors that I was using, definitely go for that, because you can use the orange, as you can see that I'm doing here, or you could even throw a teeny weeny little bit of red in this section down here where things are a little bit darker, and that can work beautifully as well. So you definitely don't have to stick with these dull colors just because it's fall time. The other thing you can do to get some neutrals if you don't have browns and you want a little bit more of a neutral look is after you use your bright colors like your red and your orange, you could always come in and do these darkest sections with a little bit of dark purple or a little bit of even like a indigo or navy blue. And that would be another way you can get dark neutral shadows. I think that I might even do that in these deepest sections right here, is grab my indigo blue and just put teeny weeny little bit of it in these spots that go between the petals. And that's just going to push it even further back than what it already is. But a dark purple would be perfectly fine here as well. I'm really pushing it by going into the indigo blue. You can always use a red color as a bit of an intermediate. This is my red violet, and you can see how that works as well. So you can see you can achieve some pretty beautiful colors without even using our burnt sienna, and maybe that's the way I should have gone, but I went with the more neutral colors first, but you wouldn't even have to if you wanted to just jump ahead and use a little bit more vibrant colors and then throw in some purples and some blues at the end. That's a totally fine option as well. What I basically did is worked from the yellow on the color wheel and worked down the warm side of the color wheel, adding, yes, in my case, neutrals, but there's no reason you couldn't just go from yellow, orange to red, and then finally to purple, and then to blue. And finally, let's just do a quick little bit of detail on this little one. Let's, with this one, skip the burnt ochre, and let's just see if we can do this by using orange, red, and then our neutral purple and our indigo blue. So we'll have these colors still here, but let's skip the burnt ochre and just show you how that would work. So I'm going to go ahead, put some oranges here. And again, I already have that golden ochre color, so I do have a bit of neutral colors on here already, right? That golden color is a little bit on the dull side, but let's just throw some oranges in here so we get closest to the base of these. A little bit on the background ones, or I should say the ones that are behind. And then finally, let's go throw a little bit of this purple color. And this is a neutral purple, so it's going to kind of dull things down automatically. Let's put a few stronger veins with that color. And then finally, if we need to, we can throw a little bit of this indigo kind of at the base, but I don't even know if we need it as much here because we are going to be getting our greens and that'll be getting pretty dark in a hurry. So let's get those greens on there. So let's fill in these leaves, try and get some details for them because they've got some nice long, almost, if you will, like tails on the leaves. Are kind of, it's hard to get them on there because I've already done all my yellows, but let's emphasize some at the edge. There we go. That makes it more interesting. Then we'll fill in this section here. And then let's just do our stems. And I'm using my lightest green for now, and I'll get the darker greens on here in a minute. I'm just using a circular motion to fill in my leaves. Decided to add a little bit of a turn or a curl on this leaf. Not necessary, but maybe I'll make it like this is poking on the other side of here. Then I'll use one of my darker greens. Again, this is a little bit more on the olive side. And do this side of each stem, the left side of each stem, a little bit darker. We'll say it's in shadow. And we'll put a little bit of darkness there. Again, let's go on the left side of this stem with this darker green. Give it some shadow. Then we'll do these and we'll do the veins. Okay, this one is awkward. I definitely did an odd shaped leaf there, but it worked. And I'm going to do a little bit of darker green kind of towards the vein here. It's furthest from the light. And then some more dark green at the base of this leaf. So you can kind of get the impression that the light came, hit that, went to the shadow as it got close to the vein because the vein created a bit of a valley, and then lightened off again as the leaf kind of rose out of the valley, if you will, and then got dark again as I came lower down. I'll repeat that on these other leaves. Definitely, I don't need to worry about the veins as much on here because it's kind of hidden, but I do want to darken this leaf so that it looks like it's behind our front sunflower here. So push it back by darkening it a little bit with the dark green. Then I'll just add a few details to these leaves with the dark green, especially here as they kind of cross over onto the flower. And then let's darken kind of the edges of this here. This is kind of the centerpiece where everything attaches, but I want to keep it a little bit lighter than the leaf behind it, so that helps it to pop out. I don't know, does that pop out enough? I'm not sure if it does. Let's darken the leaf a bit more. Okay, that leaf's really dark, but I think it helps this pop out. Okay, so chrysanthemums are a slightly more challenging flower, but I think that if we walk step by step together, it will not be too difficult. To get started, I'm going to lightly draw in with my pencil kind of where I want these flowers to be. And so these are just kind of guidelines. Again, I'll be erasing them. And then I'll do one here. And this one's going to be a little bit side profile, so it's a little more of an elliptical shape. And this one here is more round. So I'm thinking I'm just gonna go with something like that. Maybe just do 2. And then maybe we'll put some leaves. Maybe make some stems for leaves. I don't know. Again, it's easier to fix things if we do it in pencil, isn't it? If we do that first. Not sure if I quite like this one. Might make it more lined down up there. I don't know. We'll see, but it gives us just some basic guidelines and we can just go ahead and tweak as we go. So I'm going to start with the big one first. I think it's actually a little bit easier, and then we'll do the side profile one. So I'm starting by just doing some circles in the middle, and I am using this Red Violet by Faber-Castell because I like how it's kind of just a deep maroon color. And these are the smallest or innermost little petals here. So I've got a bunch of them like that. And then I'm going to just gradually build out with slightly larger ones, and they're going to kind of branch out from the center. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating some petals that have a little bit more of a point to them. So I'm going to just start doing this and going slightly larger, and I'm just kind of going randomly around the circle, adding these petals. And as I come outwards, I'm going to gradually increase the size of them. So you can see I'm already increasing the size on a few of these. And if I'm working closer in, I'll go a little smaller. And we don't have to be perfectly symmetrical either. Like we can have a big one thrown in there a little sooner than maybe on the other side. But we'll try and gradually get larger as we come out. So we're just doing these little pointy shape petals. And try and avoid symmetry, kind of like mix them a little bit so they don't overlap each other exactly the same way each time. And you can even turn your paper in circles if you want to. Might make it easier than trying to work all right side up. Some of these I can definitely see I'm getting a little bit too symmetrical, but it's okay. I'll just try and break that up a bit as I go. Again, I'm going to try and get a little bit larger as I come out. Just keep going around so that I kind of am randomly getting them on here. And there's not really a super right or wrong. There's not really a right or wrong way here. I'm just trying to really just fill in the spaces till I've pretty much completed our circle. It doesn't even have to be a perfect circle either. We can kind of erase that circle after and decide where we might need to add a few petals or whatever to kind of make things look a little bit more natural. We don't want to have it like perfect, like a perfect circle. We just, you know what I'm saying? You want to have just a few gaps because sometimes flowers do have some gaps between the petals and that makes it a little more natural. So sometimes you can pack a few petals closer together and then leave a little gap. Actually not minding this one too much. I might notice spots that bother me afterwards, but I would rather kind of stop before I go overboard than to go crazy too soon. Then what I'm going to do is add some shadows, and I'm going to do that by kind of darkening at the base of each of these. So you'll see what I'm doing in a sec. It'll get more apparent as I work my way out. So I'm kind of going darkest where each shape meets another. So this is just going to be doing a very repetitive process. So I'll speed the video up so you don't have to watch the whole thing, but I think you'll get the idea, and it's amazing how this is going to just shape up as we add our shadows. And again, it's always kind of at the base of each petal, and then you can kind of let that just fade outwards a little bit as it comes closer to the outside of the petal. Then in the center, I'm going to just deepen some of these shapes, make them a little bit darker. I'm applying just a little bit more pressure there because that is where the color is more intense, in the center of the flower. Then on this one, I'm going to kind of do the same sort of idea in the center, and that is a few of these little dot things. My pencil's so sharp that I'm breaking it, but then what I'm going to do is start creating a few longer petals, kind of like this, that are kind of wrapping around the center. Rather than seeing the same amount of the petal all the way around, this is side profile, so some of them are, we're going to be able to see the whole side of the petal. We can do a few short ones if we want to, but we're going to be seeing the side of some of these petals and then barely any of that the petals on the opposite side, they're kind of along the back here. They're just going to be short because they're behind. And then as they come forwards, they're longer because we can see them kind of more side profile, right? So some short ones in the back. It's a little more tricky, and these long ones in the front. And then we're going to start getting some of these. We can do just a few short ones that are kind of lying down. And then I'm going to just start drawing these again, but I'm going to be making these shapes a little shorter along the front because, again, we're doing side profile. And so these front ones are kind of curling towards us this way. And so you don't see the full length of the petal because they're kind of doing that. So that's why they're a little shorter at the front there. And then these side ones are going to be slightly different shape. There's not as many side looking petals, if you will, but we'll get a few of them on there and then start filling in the back with some of these. And you can even have some of them be a little smaller and then some of them bigger. And I'm going to try and break up the monotony a little bit because I feel like I'm getting things a little too similar and I'm not liking that. So I'll try and break that up a little bit with how I lay things down here. And as I come further away from the center, I'm going to have these drooping downwards a little bit more so that we can actually see more of the petals. So they're going to look longer just because we can see more of them. And of course they are getting bigger as they come away from the center of the flower as well. Then you can always just fill in any gaps that you see if you need to kind of widen a petal or add another petal in here or there. Don't want it to go too crazy, but you can see some of mine are a little bit on the sloppy side. I'm not too worried. Then what I'm going to do is the exact same thing as far as shading. I'm going to come in closest to the center and shade the section that's closest to the center or darken it a little bit with this color. And as I work my way out, there will probably be less and less of it. But again, just repeating what I did over there, except the shapes are slightly different because of it being on a side profile. Or I guess I should say maybe a 3/4 profile. It's not really on the side, is it? If any of your shapes start to mush together, again, just always think which shape is in the back or which shape is kind of behind the other one and darken where those two edges meet. And that's going to push the shape that's behind visually. Add a little extra darkness in the center. And then what I'm going to do is to make these a little different from each other is just change the color that I lay over them. And so I think for the back one, I'm going to use, this is a kind of a reddish color. It's called Venetian Red and it's by Faber-Castell. I'm just going to use the side of the pencil and just lightly fill this flower in with this color so that we don't really have a lot of white gaps showing. And I think this flower is going to look darker anyways, just because of the way I shaded it. I feel like I have extra color on here. And I can always push those shadows darker too if I need to. If I'm feeling like I'm losing any, I can always just come in here and just, again, push things a little bit further, make some petals look like they're behind other ones using my red violet. And then this front one, I'm going to use a more golden color. So you could use the golden ochre or the light yellow ochre and just fill it in. And again, the fastest way to fill it in, it was probably to just use the side of your pencil because we're not getting a lot of detail here. I just want to get a little bit of that beautiful yellow undertone. Then I'm going to remove the regular pencil that we used just to kind of give ourselves our guidelines here. I'm going to get rid of that. That's going to help me decide if I need to add a few petals to either of these flowers because I won't be as distracted by the pencil lines. And I could add more to this one, but I think, well, I don't know. I'm actually not minding it too much. There's a chance if I go too crazy here, I might mess up what I have, but I might just throw, I don't know, maybe the odd one in. And then just throw a little bit of that yellow on top. Now for the leaf of a chrysanthemum, we're going to want to have a center vein and then some veins that come off of it. And then we're going to go over it with kind of, it's almost like it has a tip to each of these. And sometimes they even have like a little leaf that comes off of it. It's kind of a unique shape of leaf. Actually, why don't I do this? Something like that. You can always look for a picture of a chrysanthemum leaf if you want. It's sort of like that. And so you're kind of drawing like these kind of bumpy little goofy things around the outside of each of the veins. And so I like to do the center vein and the side veins first, then draw my leaf around it. However, you could even just keep your leaves more simple. You don't have to do leaves like this. Maybe to play it safe, I will actually draw in the leaves with this pencil again, just because I am finding the zinnias, I will be honest, are a little more challenging and I'd rather not mess them up. So that's where whenever you're feeling like something's a bit of a challenge, just grab your pencil, do a few guidelines for yourself, and you can get rid of it after by erasing. So I'm going to do these veins, and the leaves on, did I call them zinnias? And the leaves on a chrysanthemum, I'm just going to call them mums. They kind of have a little bit of a, I don't know, I almost want to say not quite like an oak leaf, but they have a really unique leaf. So they're definitely more challenging. And so I'm going to try and give myself maybe a bit of a guideline here. Just loosely sketch it with this pencil, and then I will go over it with my watercolor pencil and then erase the pencil lines. So you could just keep things simple and do a basic leaf shape. There's no need to have these kind of more meticulous looking leaves on here, but if you want that, that is kind of the effect I'm after here. But let's go ahead, quickly draw that in with my darker green pencil. And truth is, I probably could even, or I should say darker green watercolor pencil. And I might not even, because this is such a dark green, I might not even need to get rid of my pencil lines because they're going to be obliterated probably with the darkness of this pencil. If I was doing like a light yellow, then I would definitely need to get rid of these lines with the eraser, but I think, you know, I might just be able to cover them up. Now, I don't really quite like the way that I've got some of these. They're not really quite complex enough. So I'm going to maybe add a little detail as I trace here. I feel like kind of, these are looking a little almost too much like an oak leaf. And they kind of have a little bit of an oak leaf shape, but I think I'm getting a little too close to an oak leaf and less like a chrysanthemum leaf. So I'll just do my best here. I'll just speed the video up as I trace and color these. I'm going to go in nice and bold and trace these veins so that they don't disappear into the green coloring. You'll see I'm taking advantage of the tracing stage as well to tweak my leaf outlines a little bit. Finally, I will use some of that dark indigo blue just to increase the vibrancy or the darkness of my veins, make it a little more interesting. And I can later even add some shadows if I want to using this darker blue if I feel like I need to, or maybe some of the purple. I'll see, but I'll probably add a little more life to these leaves as I add water later. Let's go ahead and grab our water so that we can start blending. I've got my water jar here as well as an assortment of round brushes. I like using these Simply Simon's brushes. They're a very inexpensive, firmer brush, and they work really well alongside watercolor pencils. However, I also have some Artegria brushes here, and they're a softer brush, and they're beautiful for loose watercolor paintings. But I'm also in the process of experimenting with them with the watercolor pencils to decide if I like them. If you had to choose one, I would probably go with the Simply Simon's. When I work in watercolor pencil, I always like keeping a paper towel or a rag in my hand so that I can be dabbing my brush off because I want to avoid getting things too wet too soon. And I start on the lightest side, and with this particular flower, I'm just kind of bouncing my brush around so that the colors mingle just enough, and I can make that decision in terms of like, okay, how much do I bounce it? That'll affect how much things blend, or how many times I should say, how many passes I go over each area. So I'm going to do this one back here with my firmer brush, and then I'm going to experiment, use the softer one in the front. So again, I'm always trying to think to start in the lighter areas. You can see I went and touched down in the darker areas, but I'm going to try and go back into my lights. And then now that I'm filled in the light section, I'm coming into the dark section. That's pretty. I think I like that. Okay, let's try an Artegria brush this time and just see. I tend to work wetter with them, and it won't massage things as well. So we're going to see how this is. We're working wetter. Still bouncing around. And I think I like the Simply Simons one better. Better to have a little bit drier, firmer brush. What do you guys say? I'm getting drier as I work my way down here because I haven't dipped in the water. And so I think the dryness is actually helping. So if you dry your Artegria brush off a little more, it would work fine as well. But I think the Simply Simons might be my favorite for that technique. Now the leaves I don't think will matter as much, so I'm just going to go over them. Again, I'm going to start in my lightest sections and work into the darks. You can decide if you don't like your colors mingling, like you don't want any green to kind of blend into your pinks, wait until the pink is dry. But if you like some color blending, you can come up to your pink section with your green as you're wetting things and let the colors kind of mingle a little bit. I kind of like that look, but you can do what you like. And I'm going to just go over every leaf, doing the same thing. Lightest areas first, work into the dark areas. Then when everything is 100% dry, you can come in with your watercolor pencils and add any details that you might have lost. For instance, as you can tell with my Autumn Joy here, I was way too wet and got things way too blended over here for my liking. So I'm just going to come in and repeat these little flower buds here. You can also decide if you want to push your greens a little further, like I'm doing here. I felt like the outline of the yellow ochre was just a bit much. It was still showing through, so I wanted to kind of cover that up a little bit. Then you want to be very careful and even more dry this time around so that you maintain your details as you apply water. You can just leave it unblended, but I usually do like to still come in with a little bit of water and blend things around. But I'm going to be working drier this time and really trying to avoid overworking or massaging that color out too much, because as you can tell, last time I used that softer brush and lost some of my detail right in that section. So I'm just going to throw one of my darker greens a little bit into my leaves here because I feel like they're just getting a little bit too, I don't know, they need that olive green, a little bit of that olive green, dark green look. So I wet it, take a little bit of paint off of my pencil and just drop a little bit of that darker green in. Optional, but I think it just adds a little something to it that this was lacking. I kind of lost my folded leaf look there, but that's okay. I could come in if I wanted to with another layer there to fix it, or just let it be. I think I'm liking that better. All right, for my sunflower, I'm going to go ahead and start adding a little bit of water, doing the dotting thing, the same sort of idea as we did on our Autumn Joy. So I'm just dropping some water in, kind of in a dotting little motion here. You could use either brush. This one might get a little too blended, so just be aware that the more water you apply, the more it's going to want to mush together. Don't over massage it when you're really wet. So I'm just dropping this in and I'm going to work my way to the outside of this. I don't mind things moving around and blending a little bit. It feels like it's getting a bit wet there and a little bit mushy, so I'm drying off my brush. I might even just stop because things are getting really wet. Just keep trying it. Just be really careful. When things are starting to feel too much, you can either just pause it or grab a drier brush. But because I'm quite wet, I have to be very careful, but I think I'll be okay. And if you were to look at this really closely, you would be able to tell that not every single little space has been filled in. There are some dry spaces, which is sort of helping block the color and the water from completely mushing together. So I'm gonna let that be. And I might go work on this sunflower first, and then as this dries, I'll come to the top. So I'm going to work into each of my petals, starting in my lightest areas and dragging it to the darks. Might be able to just let this dark color as I come in here kind of flow back into the yellows. So I'm starting in my lights, working into my darks, but I am kind of encouraging those darks to really flow into the light section a little bit more than I sometimes would. And I'm just going to be doing these front petals first, and then I will come and do the back ones after the front ones have dried. Some of these don't have enough color because I didn't color enough on them. So I'm going to grab my golden ochre and just put a splash of it in a few spots just to create just a little bit more color. And if you want to have some green blend into your sunflower petals at all, you can wet the odd green shape. I'm not going to do all of my green shapes right now because I don't want it to overblend. I don't mind having a little bit of green leaking into my wet yellows, but I don't want it everywhere, so I'll just do it in a few spots, and then I'm going to leave it alone and do the rest of my greens in a little while once that's dried. And if you don't like that look of the green kind of mingling, you can just totally let the sunflower dry and don't wet your greens until the sunflower is done. So because the center is still wet, I will have to be careful, but I'm going to go ahead and do some of my petals, and I'll probably be dropping the golden ochre in a few spots, but I'll go in my lightest sections first, come up to my darks, and then encourage the dark to blend back into the yellows just a little bit. Again, we're doing this with control. We're not just smushing it around, because otherwise we would completely lose our lights and our darks, and we wouldn't see the difference between them. So you want to just do this with caution and control. So you're just doing, you know, as I said, lights first, move into the darks, and move those darks back into the lights just the amount that you want to move them. And as you can see, I'm jumping around. I am not doing every petal beside each other because I do want them to be sort of remaining separate. It's okay to have some colors, as you know, mingle together, but if you're not cautious, all of your petals could just kind of fuse into one. Draw a bit of my golden color in there. So I'll just go around now and wet every second or third petal. And while those petals are drying, I'm going to work on my leaves. So I'm just going to go as usual into my lights and blend into the darks. I feel like the way that this is blending is maybe a little bit overworked looking, and it's not blending super well. So I'm going to switch over to my Simply Simon's brush, which is firmer, and just see if I like that better. This is just my theory, but I feel like the firmer brush maybe allows things to blend faster so that you don't have to massage it as much, and so you kind of can avoid that overworked look. That's just my theory, but I do find there's times that I kind of lean towards the firmer brushes with watercolor pencils, although I do, as you see, use both. I'm going to drop a little bit of this golden color into this one here because it's feeling anemic. And that will help harmonize our sunflower and our leaf with each other. And I don't mind a little bit of that golden color in my sunflower leaf just because I want the fall look, but if you're wanting it to look more summery, you'll probably want more green instead of yellow there. Now I think I'm going to let that dry for a minute so that I don't get my greens from this leaf blending into that sunflower. So I'll let it dry and then I will be back. All right, so my sunflower is dried. So I'm coming back in and I'm going to fill in the remaining petals. And I'm going to do the exact same thing as I did before with wetting the lights first, dragging some darks up, and then if I need to, I drop a little bit of my golden ochre in. Then when I come in to do these petals here on this sunflower, I'm going to definitely be focusing on getting them looking like they're behind the other ones by adding a little extra golden ochre to them. Because I really want to push them back visually. I especially want to make sure it's nice and dark where the edges are meeting. And then I'm going to wet this green leaf. And in this case, it's not touching my wet petal, so I can go ahead and wet that. And then I'll wet my stem. With my sunflower, I'm pretty much happy with it. The only thing that's standing out to me is the fact that this leaf is kind of almost like blending into the top of the sunflower, or the greens, I should say, the sunflower. So for that, I'm just going to take a darker green pencil, maybe even a tiny little bit of my darker blue, and just push that leaf back a little bit further so that it does look separate from our sunflower shape. And then, yeah, you wouldn't even have to wet it because that's not something that's showing up as much here, but hey, why not? Why not get the watercolor look in here still? So we'll just add some water to that little shape. And I'm just going to refine the edge of the sunflower here. I got a little bit of the green coming with kind of a weird hard edge. So I'm just kind of lightly lifting that, softening that edge, just trying to get things cleaned up a little teeny bit. So I'm just using water on my brush to do that. And if I lift more than I'd like to, I can always come in with a little bit of golden ochre. I don't even know if it's necessary, but if I feel like I've lifted too much color out of my petal, sorry, I can just drop a little bit of my golden ochre back in there. And there we have our fall sunflowers. Just as we try to avoid blending our sunflower petals together, we want to kind of keep the same thought in mind as we blend the petals on our chrysanthemums. So we're going to want to either make sure we're a little more dry as we do this, or that we jump around a little bit so things don't move mush together. So I'm just going to start by wetting some of my shapes. I can always leave a little gap between the wet shapes, like there's a little white section. You can do that so things don't mush together. And you're going to be more cautious as you do this. I'm just stroking downwards with my brush as I do this. And I'm just going to see when things start to look a bit mushy, I will kind of jump around from one little shape to the next, or leave that little bit of a gap. But if you don't want to be leaving gaps, then just kind of move around a bit. Ooh, I'm quite wet there. So when I'm that wet, I definitely don't want to have things mush together. So I'm going to kind of just leave a slight bit of spacing. And again, you're going to notice I start in my lightest section and work into the darker sections. If you find you're dragging some of your darker purple color into your lighter sections of your petals, you're going to want to wash your brush. Let's go down here and work for a little bit, and then we'll come back up to the top as it's drying. So I'm going to just dot these center ones a little bit because they're kind of scattered, and I'll leave some white spaces between the dotting, and then I can always come back in after if I want to blend it a little bit more. But I don't want to, like I say, this flower I don't want to over blend. And since this is going to be quite repetitive, I'm just going to speed the video up and you'll be able to see this as it comes together. Then I'm going to jump up to the top one again so that the bottom one can dry a little bit and we can fill in the shapes that we have skipped on the top. And when things are feeling a little bit tight or close together, I'll just leave those alone, move back to the bottom. So I'm going to go back and forth between the two of them until I've blended all of my little tiny petals. And if things are feeling kind of wet to carry on, just pause or grab your hairdryer, and then when things are dry, come back and finish those last few petals. I've let my chrysanthemums dry and I'm coming back in and filling in these remaining spots. And this is where you can go around your flower and you might find there's just tiny little specks of color that are still left unblended, and you can always go in there and just gently wet those, blend them a little bit, and then you'll have a better idea as to whether you're going to need to add any color at the end. You always want to do this with control just to make sure that you don't blend things in any kind of weird direction. So you definitely want to still kind of use your brush strokes, or I should say make your brush strokes move in the direction of these little petals. Finally, I'm going to wet my green leaves, but I'm going to have my purple pencil available because I'm probably going to want to add some of that in here just to create harmony and to create some variety as well in these leaves, because I think they're going to look pretty flat the way they are. I'm going to use my Simply Simon's brush or my firmer brush for this. I really don't want to over massage things. And then I will just drop a little bit of that purple in. I'll drop it where it does look like it could almost be like, you know, coming off of the chrysanthemum itself. And then I'll just drop in a few other places. I feel like I kind of overdid my purple on this one, so I'm definitely going to try and be a little more controlled on my other ones. I think it's pretty, it just seems like maybe it's a bit overdone if I put that everywhere. With this one, I only put water up to that center vein here, and then I'm adding the purple along that vein. I'm gonna let the other side of this leaf dry, and then I'll come back to it after. You can even use the purple in your leaves to kind of carve the edge of your flower if it's getting a little bit lost there. So I'll just speed things up as I add the water. Now that the other side of the leaf is almost dry, I'm coming in here and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to be put more purple maybe along the center vein. This is optional, but I kind of like the look, so. Okay, this one is going to need a little something because it's definitely gone flat in my opinion. So what I'm going to do is just go in with my purple color again and sort of push each of these little shapes where they're getting blended into the next one. So for instance, if you look right here, these shapes have kind of gotten lost. Obviously, I wet them in a bad order or whatever happened, they got lost. So I'm going to redefine them and then always darken where it's kind of closest to the center of that flower. So I'm just going to do that with these. And in some ways, I'm really repeating the step I did earlier, but I'm just doing it again so that I make it a little bit more intense. And this is optional. If you like the soft look, you can leave it, but to me, it was kind of just a little bit too flat. So I'm going to go around quickly. I'll speed the video up as I throw in the second layer. I'm repeating it with the purple one as well, but I'm going to use a combination of the purple and indigo to kind of push things where I want just a little bit more darkness and depth. You want to be especially careful with the indigo because it's very dark, and when you add water to it, it could become too blue too quickly, so just be cautious. I'm going to be using a combination of a little bit of the dark green and indigo together and just fill in some of my areas that I want to have kind of like a darker shadow. I'm going to fill this little white section in here because I feel like it just ends up taking a little bit too much attention to itself. Sorry, I kind of was going out of the camera area there. Anyways, I'm darkening this leaf compared to this one so that this one looks like it's behind this one. So I did a combination of the green and the indigo blue, and then I went over the veins with purple just to help them stand out a little bit, and then I will go ahead and wet all my shapes. Now I'm going to use my Simply Simons brush this time so that I can keep things drier than I did the last time, and just come in and just wet some of those tiny little shapes that we just created and just get them to blend around just enough. And just like I did before with this one, I'm going to be jumping around because I don't want things to get too mushed. I will try and keep things drier than I did before, but I still want to be just cautious that I don't blend shapes together. So I will speed things up as I do this because it's going to take me a few minutes and you'll be able to see how it comes to life with the water. But if you guys feel that it would be helpful for you at all to have me slow down and explain anything, let me know because I can definitely go slower. I just feel like this is probably pretty self-explanatory at this point. And then finally, I will just go in and add a tiny bit of water into some of these leaves just to blend around the extra color that I put on them. This section here feels just a little bit light to me, so I'm just putting a tiny little bit more of that purple color just to tone things down and kind of push this area of the painting into the shadow. And then I'm adding just enough water to blend it ever so slightly. And there's our fall chrysanthemums. Thanks so much for joining me in the studio today. I hope this tutorial has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye.